Alright, I want to give some tent reviews. We took these for 2 weeks to Arizona and New Mexico. We had like 30 students. We had a couple other tents too, but these are the ones I want to talk about. A couple slept in this, 2 people. This tent here held up pretty good. The problem with this tent, you can see, is if it's stretched out. If it's stretched out and staked down like it should be, it comes out like this, and it leaves the rain fly. So if you ever drive in rain, there's no way to keep the rain out of that part of the tent, so we had to use a tarp over it. So if you wanted to take this tent backpacking, you could stake it down. You'd probably stay pretty dry. It held up really good in the wind, but you'd probably have to have an extra rain fly. So, you know, I don't know about that tent. That's kind of the... But it held up well for what we did. We had to put a tarp over to keep it dry. And you know, whenever you use a tarp over top, you have a lot of condensation, so it becomes a problem. Now, here's another tent. See, I think I bought this one at Sears. That was relatively cheap. This tent is a Northwest Territory, and I'm sure they're all made in China. I really like this tent. This tent holds up well in the wind. It stays dry. Nobody got wet. It's big enough for 2 people. You could get 3 in there, but it's really mostly for 2 people, and you can store your gear on the wings on each side. Now these 2 over here. These 2 are the same. These tents were rated for 35-mile-an-hour wind. I don't think much of these tents. These are Ozark Trail tents. They pop up by themselves. I mean, when it was windy, they laid down, and I had to leave them laid down because they just fold right back down. Even with all the tie-outs and the stakes, they didn't hold up well. I mean, they're still intact, but they were all the time blowing down. The other problem is it says it has a built-in rain fly, which means it doesn't really have a rain fly. It just has tent to the top, and there's screens up in there to let air flow. Well, then again, you know, if you get a driving rain, there's no way to close those off, so then you would end up with rain inside the tent. The one tent was facing one direction, and this tent over here, which is the same tent, was facing the other direction. That tent over there got wet, and then everybody was wet, and so there was a problem with that. So, you know, I really wouldn't recommend buying these tents unless you're going to go into the woods where there's not going to be any wind and it's not going to rain. Or, you know, you could take an extra rain fly and throw it, and then, like I said, you know, you have... And this is one use. We used this tent for 10 days, and because it kept folding down, where this rubbed against this tent got tore. That's for 10-day use. That's about how long we used them, 10 days in a row. Well, 10 days in a row. And the best tent, this tent here was rated for 35 miles an hour. And this is a Coleman tent. Same size as these. I think they're 8x9s or something like that, 10x9. I forget what they are. And this tent held up well. The wind never blew it down. It never pulled the stakes out. Everybody in it stayed dry. It held up well. I mean, this, out of all the tents, the Coleman tent was probably the best tent that we had to use. As far as the Ozark Trails, you know, they leave some lacking stuff. They cut corners. You see the way this split's made on this Coleman tent. I don't know if you can see, that's a plug that goes in there and a stake, and that fastens that, and you put the stake in there, and you have all the tie-outs. These tents over here, this business here is all plastic. This is plastic. One of these broke on the one tent over here. Let's go to that tent. Alright, you see this one broke, so that became a problem, especially on the wind, because there's nothing there to hold that. Now I suppose I could take a rivet and rivet something into that so that stays on there, and then that would probably solve that problem. But like I said, these tents didn't hold up very well to the wind at all. They said rated for 35 miles an hour. They won't stand up 35 mile an hour wind. And they're not watertight if you get a driving rain. So, you know, you're better off to have a tent with a rain fly. See, however, you know, like on this Ozark Trail tent, you know, it has grommets in there where you can stick the poles in. Now, that's not a bad design there. This was a good tent. I got this tent at Rural King. It was like $18.99, so it's a $19 tent. This tent held up real well. The wind didn't bother it, the rain didn't bother it. You could get 3 people in there. Not going to stow much gear, but I think that's what we had in the 3 people. I was really pleased with that tent. It's called a Nordic Cross. I'm sure it's made in China too. Because we bought all cheap tents. We couldn't really afford to buy an expensive tent. I have one more to show you. Hi, Lori. That's the rain fly for it, you know, it goes on there. This tent held up pretty good. You know, it has positive feet on it. Get out of the light so you can see that. So that sets in there good, and you stake that down. You know, there's always a problem when you're in the sand that the thin stakes don't hold. Pulls loose. The problem with this Ozark Trail tent, right there it is, you know, this got torn because it got caught in the zipper, which, you know, is a normal thing. We used this tent for 10 days this year and probably 6 days last year. This is the second year we used this tent. And as you can see there, the zipper will no longer work. So the zipper's out of this one. It was torn up here where they caught the zipper in there, and then when they tried to zip it, it pulled it loose. It was done. At that point, it was done. So we had to put a fly across, another rain fly across it, so we closed that side in so they could stay relatively dry because that door would not work anymore. So I'm not too pleased with the Ozark Trail tent. That's, what did I say, 16 days that tent's been used, and now it needs new zippers. So I'm thinking from now on I'm going to steer away from Ozark Trail tents. They're just, they cut corners. They just make them cheaper so people will buy them. And I suppose you were taking in the woods, you don't have to worry about wind or anything, or rain, you know, you're fine. But if you don't have to worry about any of that stuff, you can just sleep outside and look at the stars, you know. Put a mosquito net over you and sleep right on the cot on the ground or on the sleeping bag on the ground, you know. So no point in even carrying a tent, you know, if it's not going to do what you want it to do. So I suggest staying away from the Ozark Trail tents. Just, you know, if you want a cheap tent, you can use for, you know, one summer and throw away, you know, have at it. Well, yeah, that's just my opinion. This rain fly in this tent. Here's an example of what we ended up with. See, that piece is broken. That's supposed to hook. Simple little thing, you know, just hooks on the thing. Hold it down, hold it taut, and this is what it's supposed to look like right there. Like cheap little plastic. And, you know, and this is what they end up looking like after they break. And then what? You have to get a piece of paracord and tie them down. The rain fly just barely covers the sides. It comes down to like maybe here. So, you know, if the wind starts to blow, the rain fly comes off. The rain gets in, the tent's wet, and then you have to wait till it stops raining. The sun comes out to dry your tent out. So, you know, you're sleeping in a wet tent. So, not a very good tent either. Sorry, Ozark Trail, but not very good tents. Alright, that's all I'm going to say on these tents. Hope you enjoy the video.